Hiya, my name's Jenny. I'm the Reading Coordinator at Liverpool Learning Partnership, and welcome to Stories That Inspire, our video series that looks at how stories featuring characters from books or historical figures that have shown resilience through adversity have inspired and the lives and careers of people who live and work in Liverpool. So today I'm joined by John Maguire, who is an author, a playwright, and the director of a community interest company called ArtsGroupie. So, hiya, John.
Hello, good morning. Thank you for having me.
How are you? You okay?
All good, all good. Spring is on its way, so I'm happy.
Yeah, very nice. Nice to see the bright weather outside. So your career, as I mentioned, it encompasses quite a few different areas. Can you tell us briefly a little bit about maybe your writing?
Okay, so I'm predominantly a playwright, and I've had recent success with a play called Kitty, Queen of the Wash House, which was about the iconic Liverpool heroine, Kitty Wilkinson, who opened the first public wash house in the UK. And at the moment is the only female statue in the St. George's Hall. And the play was her statue coming alive and telling her historical story.
You know me as the saint of the slums, hound of heaven, queen of the wash house.
My name's Catherine Wilkinson, but you can call me Kitty.
So I write plays. I also write prose and short stories. And I used to write for a magazine called 10 Million Hardbacks, and I'll be doing that again soon, which is like book reviews and all art and theatre reviews as well.
It's quite varied writing, really. Do you quite like doing a mix of things?
Yeah, I kind of like having a day like Wurzel Gummidge. I like a different head every day. So I work in community engagement 1 day a week. I work as a project coordinator on the Year of Writing 2 days a week, and then I also run art. The plays are produced by the CIC that I work in, which is called ArtsGroupie, and the aim of ArtsGroupie is to make the arts accessible to all. So we take theatre, like we took the Kitty play, to places that you wouldn't really expect to see theatre in. So we went in summer of 2019, we took Kitty to Shropshire and on a rural tour where we played church halls, small little village community hubs. It was very, very, very surreal, but really, really positive. To take a positive Liverpool character and show her off around the country.
And you mentioned that ArtsGroupie is a CIC. So for young people watching, can you tell us what that means and what you do?
Okay, so it's a community interest company. So what that means is that we have to report every year. We have objectives and aims, and our main aim is to make the arts accessible to all. So every year we have to write a report back to the community interest company offices to say how we are doing that. And what that simply means is any profit or any money that's made on the projects that we do are reinvested back into those projects for the communities that we work in. So we've done a lot of work in Liverpool 13 and Liverpool 25, and we're now expanding and going to work in Knowsley, Liverpool 16, in Courtay Park, with a project called Horticulture, which is vegetable growing sessions on one side with the horty, and then the culture, we are providing writing and arts-based craft workshops. So we're providing the culture, and it's all outdoors. So I can't wait to start that.
That sounds so exciting. So a lot of it's about engagement, isn't it? And getting people interested and excited in the arts. A lot of your work, your writing and your community work seems to be linked by that.
Absolutely. I'm from a working class background, and when I was a kid, I was a bit of a bit kooky, a bit different, and a bit arty, and that didn't really go down well on a council estate. So I found that the arts was my pathway, my escape. Libraries, books gave me the route to see it opened up a whole new world. So I'm very passionate about making sure that people are well represented in the arts from those backgrounds, and also that we go and work in those areas so that people have positive role models. And you can see, when I was a kid and I told my granddad I wanted to be an actor and I wanted to work in the arts, he laughed and was like, "Oh, well, you'll never do that. You'll never be able to do that. You should be a policeman, you need a proper career." So I'm basically wanting to make sure that everyone realizes careers in the arts are viable, and that if you're passionate about something, you only get one life. So you have to do what you enjoy, because it's no dress rehearsal, really.
That's the words that we all need to live by, aren't they? Definitely.
Definitely,
Do what you enjoy. And one thing I hear that you do, which just sounds really exciting, is you do walking tours as well.
Yeah, I love, when I lived in London, I remember speaking to an old historian who worked in this bookshop, and he said, I was like saying how where I was working in Shepherd's Bush was a dump. And he was like, just look up. He wasn't Scouse, but it sounds better when he is from Liverpool. He said, just look up when you go out, lad. And I looked up and saw all these amazing buildings and it started getting me passionate about learning about the history. So when I moved back to Liverpool when I was 27, after being away for 10 years, I came back and I looked at my home city with new eyes, and I started to learn about the history of Liverpool. And I find it just fascinates me how much we don't know about our own city. Kitty Wilkinson opened the first public wash house. The first art gallery public art gallery was in Liverpool. There's so many firsts in this city, and that started me doing the walking tours. And I love showing people, particularly from Liverpool, the things we walk past on a day-to-day basis we don't realise are there. There's so much history on every corner. For instance, everyone always knows the two liver birds on the building, the first ever skyscraper in the UK. And yet, what they don't realise is that was the civic symbol of Liverpool. So there's over 100 liver birds in Liverpool. So 100 liver birds.
Wow.
There's one on top of Marks and Spencer's. I'm not going to tell you where. You'll have to come on the tour to do that. But,
I will do.
In the summer, we're going to be launching the Liver Bird Safari, which takes like a kind of safari element, binoculars, and the history of Liverpool will be told through going around the different liver birds. So we'll start at the Blue Coat, where my favourite liver bird, well, one of my favourites, sorry, I've got a few, is just on the gates outside the Blue Coat chambers in the city centre. And then we'll go all around the city and tell the history of Liverpool with an alternative slant. But I have to tell people, don't be fooled. The seagulls in the city are seagulls. They're not liver birds.
They're not liver birds.
The seagulls, and they need to be stopped. But yeah.
You've written a story about the liver bird as well, haven't you?
Yeah. So we've got. I really love fairy tales. The darker, the better. The old school fairy tales, and the liver bird is a short. It's kind of a fable about this little boy who's getting bullied in school, and he starts to see a liver bird, and the more he sees the liver bird, the more he becomes a little bit more resilient and a bit stronger. And yeah, it's going to be. It was originally written to accompany the liver bird safari, so that when tourists from around the world come on the walking tours and they want to take something home with them, I thought it would be great to have a little fairy tale that also tells the history of the liver birds in a kind of subtle way, not in a kind of boring, the live factual way. So that was the plan, but then obviously lockdowns occurred and all things have changed. So as it's evolved now, we're looking at doing the liver bird as a outdoor theatre piece in the summer, hopefully. So it's been adapted and will then go out into and go to schools and whatnot as well. So it becomes and again, we can go and take that to places like Shropshire and to places that don't normally get theatre, traditional theatre venues. And I feel it'll be good to be promoting something positive about Liverpool,
Yeah.
because our city is great. I am biased, but it is one of the most wonderful cities in the world, if not the most wonderful city. And that's because of the people in the city. Everyone from Liverpool is a storyteller. They just don't, some of them won't realise, but they are. Because if you sit in a cafe or a bar in Liverpool, or you go to see family or in a community hub, you start talking to people. Everyone has this narrative, this natural way of, well, I say everyone, some people can be boring, but this natural way of telling a story.
Do you know, I mean, I know that my accent makes me, I am from Wigan, but my family are all from Liverpool. And when you're saying they're all storytellers, so many of my members of my family are popping into my head now because they are all natural storytellers.
Yeah. And you know what the thing is with Liverpool is, you don't have to be born in Liverpool to be Liverpudlian. I mean, Kitty Wilkinson was born in Ireland and she become an honorary Scouser. I think it's a state of mind. And I think if you reside here, I know so many people who've come to live in Liverpool for work and end up staying here forever because it's a state of mind. And then by default, you're a Scouser. So it's not, and Wigan's close anyway. So that's a,
it's only down the road. And, my mum and dad were both Scousers. So.
Exactly.
I'm the only one with a Wigan accent. So you mentioned that in that story, the little boy develops resilience. And we're actually here to talk today about a historical figure who actually showed quite a lot of resilience to adversity. So can you tell us about who that is that you want to speak to us about?
So I wanted to speak to you about you could call him the father of culture in Liverpool, William Roscoe. Okay. So William Roscoe was a great man who was born to his mum and dad run a tavern in Hope Street, on the corner of Hope Street, and they were market gardeners. So they had a back garden, and they used to sell potatoes. And he was passionate about education, and he 1753 was born. Yeah, I'm just getting the dates right. 1753, 1831. This is a book about William Roscoe by George Chandler.
A biography of him, then.
A biography of him, yes. And his mum and dad were run a market tavern, and then he basically was self-taught, self-made. So he wasn't like educated in your traditional way, and he became a lawyer. And he used to write poetry. And when you look at his writings, his poems from late 1700s, early 1800s, they're very archaic. So what I mean by that is they're very old and hard to read.
Yeah.
But he gives us a glimpse of what Liverpool was like as it was becoming a massive port. So the old dock had opened in 1715, which made Liverpool the gateway to the rest of the world. So in Roscoe's time, he saw the city really develop and boom population-wise. Now, as we all know, the city made a lot of money through trade, and sadly, some of that trade was through, human trafficking, through the slave trade. And Roscoe was absolutely adamant against the slave trade, and he stood up in Liverpool at a time when a lot of his friends were making money from the slave trade. He stood up and said, "This is wrong." He had such a good moral compass, and he was all about establishing Liverpool as the place. He used to call his friends Liverpolitans instead of cosmopolitan, Liverpolitans, and he wanted to sort of emulate the kind of societies like in Italy, where the citizens all respected the arts and had civic pride. So I find this man fascinating because I personally have a lot of civic pride in Liverpool. He did such great things for the city. He he helped to found the Athenaeum, which was a club. He helped the the first ever art exhibition took place. He was behind that. The Botanical Gardens and Wavertree, he was behind that. And in his lifetime, he wrote prolifically alongside his career as a lawyer. He wrote a very, very famous poem called so famous I forgot it, The Butterfly's Ball and Grasshopper's Feast, but for his son. Now, when I discovered him, I was writing a book of poetry called Sophie and the Spider, which was for my little niece, who was 7 at the time. And it was all around poems that were made up about animals that we encountered on the allotment that we were working on. And I came up with these poems purely to distract her, because she was, 7 and on an allotment all day digging with me. And I love the BFG, that story, and the fact that Roald Dahl wrote that for his I think it was his granddaughter.
Yeah.
His granddaughter Sophie, Sophie Dahl. So I discovered this biography, and it resonated because at the time I was reading, I was writing Sophie and the Spider, and the fact he'd written a poem specifically for his. Now, what I love is when people write or create something, and they do it just out of the love of it, and it becomes successful. It's not planned, because now everyone's on Instagram, and we're all blogging and tweeting, and everything's how can I put it, almost pre-planned and marketed. Now, I love it when a piece of art comes from nowhere. So I love the fact his poem was successful, and it wasn't planned to be successful. It was just for his family. King George III actually had it turned to music. Now, this poem was out in 1802. In 1865, Lewis Carroll wrote the very famous Alice in Wonderland, which is all around, the Mad Hatter, all the different animal characters. Now, the Butterfly's Ball is basically all the creatures in the garden getting together for a bit of a shindig, bit of a party. And essentially, it's very much like Lewis Carroll-esque, and, the work of Edward Lear. So I think he has, he's had an influence on those writers. He wrote the poem Mount Pleasant when he was 16, which mentions the wrongness of slavery. And then he wrote 2 poems, The Wrongs of Africa Part 1 and The Wrongs of Africa Part 2. They were very political poems. And he became an MP and voted against slavery in Parliament. So he helped to sort of bring that bill about. So an amazing man, really.
I mean, and that must have taken a lot of resilience, really, to go against the predominant views of the time, especially in terms of, fighting against slavery. So do you think he was a particularly resilient person?
Oh, absolutely. Also, he retired, and he lived in, if anyone knows the Inn in the Park, or I think it's called Allerton Hall now, it's been renamed. It's just outside of Wilton by Clark's Gardens. Well, that Allerton Hall, that place was he retired. He moved out from Liverpool. Well, he actually lived in the Dingle, and he wrote a poem about the Dingle. And the Dingle was countryside, if you can believe that. It's all built up now, but it was countryside, and he wrote this beautiful poem about the views of the mountains and how it was a rural idyll. And then when he retired, he moved out, and he retired, I think, in his he retired quite early in his career, and he moved out to Allerton Hall. But then he got dragged back into business by a friend of his who wanted him to, his company was going into liquidation, and his friend begged him to come and help him, and he went and helped his friend, and ended up one of the prerequisites was that he had to join the company, and then the company went bankrupt. So he lost his fortune, he lost everything in his early 60s. So he ended up in a small house, and he lost all his books. He had thousands of books, and he wrote a poem which is like on the loss of his books. And it's like a bereavement when you read this poem. He's like really, really taken out. Now, You asked me about his resilience. To go bankrupt today is bad, but to go bankrupt in the 1800s would have been horrific. So I think the fact that he was able to carry on and still be quite, quite positive, I love that.
Yeah. It takes a lot of strength for character, I think, as well, doesn't it, to bounce back after something like that?
Yeah, and imagine in your 60s where you'd gone through so much and seen so much social change. I can't be. I'm really surprised that he managed to be able to do that.
And do you reckon that learning about him and that resilience that he's shown has inspired, your life and your career?
Absolutely. So ArtsGroupie was founded in 2018, and when we were coming up about, I was trying to decide about why are we starting this organization off? What do we want to do? It was all around, well, we want to make the arts accessible to all, and also the civic pride that he had. Try and instill that in people. So when we work with an illustrator called Ella Dalton. When we were branding ArtsGroupie, we used the skeleton behind me, but we also have a made in Liverpool crest, which is the coat of arms. Coat of arms is a lovely link that is it used to be everywhere. In Liverpool, it was like the liver bird and the coat of arms were like trying to emulate what the kind of civic pride that the Romans had, with their sort of their branding. So that really did inspire me. But also as a writer, I always think sometimes lots of writer friends that I know, lots of creative people, we have so many demands now with regards to social media. We have to have lots of wear many hats, and it's very easy sometimes to stop creating and to not have time to write or not have time to paint, or if you're an artist. I kind of am always reminded by the fact that he would get up really early and he would write every day. So I try to write 500 words a day, every day. And that could be 500 words that are nonsense, but I'm doing it. And the more that you do something, repetition will set in. So yeah, in answer to your question, I do. I always ask what would William Roscoe do?
It's good to have a motto like that to drive you forward. So are you going to read us something by him?
Well, I think what I'd like, that would be lovely. What I'd like to do is there's a few lines that start off the butterfly's ball. But what I would encourage is people need to, to your viewers, go and have a look at this poem. And the language is tough and it takes a few times to read through it. But it's so funny because it's got all these creatures. You'll never look at your garden in the same way again. The Butterfly's Ball by William Roscoe. Come, take up your hats, and away let us haste to the butterfly's ball and the grasshopper's feast. The trumpeter Gladfly has summoned the crew, and the revels are now only waiting for you.
That's very inviting, isn't it? I just want to go and read the rest of it now. I want to go to that party with them.
Yeah, and it is a good shindig. It's a good party.
So obviously he's inspired you a lot. So for any young people watching, why do you think it's important that we learn about figures from the past?
Well, I always think there's a phrase that I heard many years ago, and it's always stuck with me. Life can only be understood backwards, but must be lived forwards. And I think it's very easy when we're living and we're going about our day-to-day business to not think and just act. And I think by looking at people like William Roscoe and characters from the past, we've got their lives distilled in a biography, and we've got the luxury. Then it's like a soul is trapped in that book, and you can look at that book and you can go through and you can learn from their mistakes without actually going through their mistakes. So I think it's very rich to look back at historical figures, choose a mentor, someone that you're inspired, and that could be a historical figure or a footballer now, or a singer, whatever, and then find out as much about that person as you can and see, because you're inevitably going to make your own mistakes. That's the world. But it's good to be able to look at the world through someone else's head, and someone who's lived. you know.
You have given us so much to think about this morning, both about William Roscoe, but also about the arts and careers in the arts as well. So thank you so much for taking time to talk to us today.
Fantastic. Thank you. It's been great talking about Mr. Roscoe, Esquire.
And thank you so much to all of you watching, and we'll see you soon for another Stories That Inspire.